All right, it is Wednesday, March 13. Uh, First quarter of the year is almost over. Things are flying pretty fast. Many places are on spring break, and we have South by Southwest going on in Austin. Some 300,000 people roaming the streets of Austin for the next 10 days. Lots of exciting stuff that we can talk about. In fact, will have a recap of South by Southwest next week and talk about all the highlights and things like that. But before we get rolling with our great guest today, let's have our John Sibley Butler play some music.
Okay.
Peace of mind. Where's the good thing that we should be sharing? As this way, only memories will remain. Our road. I thought I would be with you for a while, and all the plans that we made. Hey, and love, that was all that we had. Now that isn't the same. Peace of mind. It's a good time that we should be sharing. We can't find any answers. The good times we've had.
All right.
Thank you, John, for sharing that.
Thank you,
No
thank
problem.
you, thank you.
Yeah.
So lots going on, guys, and obviously we are all about digital transformation, smart cities, smart utilities, smart buildings. And today the conversation it's going to be about smart buildings, construction, a lot of changes going on there. But I wanted to preempt things by saying that there's a new report that came out that just basically says that electricity prices are rising across the land to the tune of higher than inflation, almost 4% versus inflation 3.2%. And the expectation is the prices on electricity are going to double within the next 10 years because of electrification of everything. Fascinating topics. Um, and obviously, there's a lot going on in terms of how robots and AI and technology will change the cost structure of everything that we're trying to do. But what say you, John Butler?
Well, I think we need to add something else to that list. You know, we've talked a lot about the impact of electricity on how we communicate. What about the impact of electricity on how we create and feed the planet and feed ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to the Ford Motor Company, and we just say there were many tractors before then, when everything was associated with the land, we have sort of forgotten about the land. And doing South by Southwest here in Austin, Texas, we talked about a lot of things. And one of those things was what happens when we cannot have electrified those things that would actually feed us. So all of these things are very, very interconnected. And the great thing about South by Southwest is that it's futuristic. It's no longer just music. It's all futuristic. So as we talk about the problem of electrification, and I think I sent Llewellyn and you an article on that myself. We got to include that the old idea of going back to the soil and also feeding people. But obviously, we know one thing is true, as we said last week. The most important thing in our lives now is electricity. Not only does it relate to the movement of people, it relates to the entire commerce of what we do, because you have to plug the internet in. And then if
Mm-hmm.
at if you look at the cloud and how cloud sourcing is going around the globe, if you look at where the cloud is put and how much electricity that it brings, then it brings a whole nother dimension to everything, including, by the way, our drones that we fly and walk. So we live in a plugged in or plug up kind of generation, which is new in the last 40 years. But what we don't have is a consciousness about the importance of electricity in the sense that it doesn't have to be there when we used to just plug in. So we need to also think about alternative ways of moving what we do. And Llewellyn, we would love to see the steam engine come back. We would love to see steam cars come back. So it's all about energy. So everything that we're doing now, if we look at the price of oil, it's going to be affected what's happening in the war over there in England, and the war in the Middle East with the Israeli conflict. If we look at all of that, then we have to get at the front and center, as we have said many times on the program, the importance of the production of the electricity or the atoms that make it go. So there are things that we need to talk about, but we need, and it goes just beyond the grid and housing. It goes way beyond the grid and what's happening behind the meter. It goes to the whole nature of commerce of what we do.
Okay,
By the
that's
way,
great.
yes,
Yeah.
that's what we need to. Yeah.
No, okay. Llewellyn, what say you?
To congratulate John on raising the subject of agriculture and its change and how dependent we are, of course. And I'll come to that in a moment, but I thought I'd just say a few things as become a habit about the international situation. We have a new stress in the world, and that is the multi-ethnic countries, which are most of the countries of Western Europe, the United and North America, and many other places, now have a new stress, and that is, as we have found out with the conflict in Israel and the conflict in Ukraine, but especially the Israeli conflict over Gaza, that suddenly we cannot present a united front as a country. Britain is torn apart by its minority of Muslims who are very identified with the people of Gaza. We have other countries torn apart. Certainly it's very, very difficult in France, and it's not without stress here. And this is something quite new. We haven't ever had to deal with that on this scale before, where substantial differences of national purpose exist in different strains of the population. So putting that aside, and we go to the exciting world of electricity, it is going up in price because it is in short supply. And there's been a lot of happy talk about supply. Actually, you should be congratulated, Andrews, because you've been absolutely correct and far out front in identifying the demands we're putting on the electric supply while we're not producing more. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to the former Secretary of Energy, Ernie Moniz, and he basically informally said that we couldn't probably continue the rate of conversion to renewables because we're going to need everything to meet demand. We may even need to keep some coal plants scheduled to close open. It is a crisis. It's been a building for quite a while. We've mentioned it on this program. Andres has been particularly good because he added numbers to the problem, and yet we've gone steaming ahead. I daily get emails from people who say we should stop producing any natural gas at all, shut down every bit of coal, and we have perverse situations in New England, which is sometimes perverse, not as perverse as Texas can be, but we don't have Johnny. There's a local resistance to a small LNG plant which operates intermittently, and now the power company feels it necessary, it's in Rhode Island, that it has to operate all the time because of the shortage. But why are we using LNG in New England? I'll tell you why. because the people who don't like natural gas will not allow a pipeline to be built across New York. So we get this ridiculous, expensive, and complex system of creating LNG and shipping it to New England because we won't let it come in a pipe, which is the cheap and logical way to do it. And these things are going to have to be addressed. We are into a period of crisis. Personally, I think that we're going to have a very difficult summer. We know now that we've into periods of protracted bad weather, extraordinary weather, aberrant weather, call it what you will. It isn't the weather we used to know. In New England, we've just come through an almost snowless winter. It hasn't been terribly cold. We're likely in South Africa, they're having terrible problems, particularly in South Central Africa, with drought. The mighty Kariba Dam, the largest man-made impoundment of water on Earth, which creates power for Zambia and Zimbabwe, has no water, and the power production is reduced. There's a power crisis in South Africa, but that's partly political and partly the result of other factors. But the whole world is being affected, and electricity comes into play not only because we need it in the traditional way. When you have aberrant heat, you need more air conditioning. You're going to have consistent, I think last year it was, for 54 days, Phoenix had temperatures that exceeded 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, living in conditions like that without air conditioning is intolerable. And the government of Arizona thinks that more than 500 people died as a result of the heat. It's not as easy to define heat deaths as it is cold deaths. If you freeze to death, that can be identified. You know about that from Uri in Texas. But when you get deaths from heat, they're much harder to calibrate. So we're into a new difficult period. The other very positive thing that Johnny said today, I don't believe I just said that. The other very positive thing he said today, it must have been an aberrant moment, was about agriculture. We've got to be a lot more conscious of the value of arable land. We are using land in wasteful, excessive ways. We are putting solar plants on beautiful agricultural land. That doesn't make sense. They should be on buildings, they should be over railroads, they should be over streets, not on productive farmland. And even the presence of windmills takes land out of production, but it does other things. If a farmer can get a better income, if his cash crop becomes electricity from a windmill, not from, you've skewed the agricultural basis. On the upside, we're getting tremendous advances and can anticipate further advances beyond our previous comprehension from artificial intelligence in agriculture. It will be very, very useful in harvesting. We won't have to have people up ladders picking things. We'll have robots up ladders picking just the right fruit gently enough that it's not damaged all the things that human beings were supposed to do. And likewise, the back-breaking work of harvesting from the soil, from those crops like potatoes, etc. It's a new world already. It's remarkably automated. You don't have to have a man sitting in a tractor going up and down. It can be programmed. I've seen it done. And no need for people, which also accounts for part of the loss of rural population. Unfortunately, that's not been wholly positive because it's left towns denuded of their talent and of their young people, and that's not a great situation.
Yeah, I'm actually going to coin something here because I see these convergence that we talk about: smart buildings, smart cities, smart utilities, and obviously, we're going to dive into the future of building construction and all that. But I think we should start talking about the 3D economy. The 3D economy is transforming what we're doing, the D's being digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization. And there are many impacts to that 3D economy and life cycle on how they are, basically accelerating in automation everywhere. And so this 3D economy needs to become sustainable and make sense. And I want to remind you guys real quick, we're not gonna dive into it, but we need to have really a remembrance up front on what's going on with the 3D economy as it relates to EVs. And we need to probably dive deeper into the 1-6-90 rule. Everybody remember the 1-6-90 rule from Toyota? That basically the materials to make one battery electric vehicle is the same number of materials needed to make 6 plug-in hybrid vehicles, and is the same as to making 90 hybrid electric vehicles. But the amount of CO2 displacement of the 90 vehicles is far larger than the one vehicle. And with that said, the construction element of this, buildings, houses, we have a deficit of 9 million houses in the United States. Homelessness, affordable housing is a challenge. There's all kinds of ideas from modular homes and everything, but it is a sector that has never had significant automation. New materials are needed, new code are needed, new processes are needed, new software automation is needed. And so today we have Don Bowden, CEO and founder of BuilderChain, and he has 2 things to talk about. He has BuilderPay and he has BuilderChain. And I'm curious, Don, after listening to all this and thinking about the 3D economy that we just came up with, what are your thoughts on one of my dreams when I was working at Austin Energy, ended up writing this book called The Advanced Smart Grid, first edition in 2011, second edition in 2015, that every building in America should become a power plant. And the challenge is, how do we automate the building of those buildings and how we transform the industry? What are your thoughts? And tell us more about BuilderPay and BuilderChain.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Well, this is a very interesting conversation, both from the energy perspective and the construction perspective. And one of the things we've been involved in recently is with a general contractor called Wallbridge. They're actually building a large Ford plant here in Tennessee. And they've been around a long time, but they're doing a very interesting geothermal project along the Texas coast. Apparently, the geography there and facilitates geothermal piping and electricity generation. So I think it could also provide another avenue for us to realize these greater energy demands, starting with electricity. And and there's some long-term things like fusion and things like that, but our demands are going to, I think, be realized a lot sooner than some of these longer versions of technology regarding energy. So hopefully things like geothermal and solar will be able to facilitate that more in a more immediate fashion. But a lot of the driver for energy consumption going forward is going to be data centers and AI demand. It's going to require quite a bit of electricity. So we need to figure out how to commoditize that resource and make it economically viable where it doesn't impose a constraint on that growth opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Absolutely.
if we look at things as a necessary evil, as we like to do, that is, when we went from horses and buggies, the question was, what do you do with all the manure that's on the street? And we thought we had progress, and then we did combustion engines, and here we are with the problem. And now, of course, we have all of the data centers. And I think with the data centers, my question to you, do you think they would be variable? So when we say decentralization, data centers represent a centralization of companies and people going into the cloud. Don, do you see a room for the cloud now being back in everybody's own enterprise rather than going to the cloud and storing your data in one central place. Do you see a decentralization? Well, I would have said back to the old mainframe, where every company would say, well, I'm going to take care of my own data rather than put it on X, Y, and Z. Do you see any of that as a possibility?
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. And, my perspective is, there's use cases that lend itself to a more decentralized and cloud-based approach. And there are certain scenarios where having control of that data center and like I think in the case of the military or government type resources, there's a real need to control and manage that resource. But I think one of the wonderful things about this cloud technology has enabled a lot of small startups and smaller companies to exercise this kind of technological advantage in a way that may not have been feasible before cloud technology. So I kind of look at it on a use case basis, and the same thing with blockchain technology. There's definitely scenarios where blockchain technology lends itself, and there's certain things that it isn't that valuable or that much better than maybe traditional database technology. So it's on a use case by use case basis, I believe.
So from an economic point of view, then as the price of data center of storing it on the cloud goes up, then it might be a financial kind of decisions for companies to say, well, my bill for the storage of data now has gotten astronomical, and therefore we get our own mainframe like we used to do. But I think you're exactly right. It certainly has had the impact of allowing a small enterprise to compete with anybody.
Right.
with product.
And cloud technology needs to have a competitive environment to keep prices from being more excessive than what they're delivering. So I think that's why, not just having AWS, but having Azure and Google have competitive resources to allow us to have a more competitive price model.
Well, let's take a use case here and let's look 20 years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Let us say that every building is now smart. And let's
Right.
take the city of Milwaukee, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Every city is now smart, which increases the data centers by X factor. 35% of the people now have a plug-in car, right, which increases the demand for electricity. We're going to electric airplanes right now. We want to go to electric trains right now, and everything is plugging in. And in terms of to make the country go, would the data center itself become one of the most important spine works, if you will, for the economy? Because we have to look at this not only from the technological side, we got to look at it from the job creation side. We got to look at it from the economic side and ask this question: what will the city of the future look like in terms of jobs? I know that data scientists will be there. If cities are smart, does it mean that everything needs to be repaired and et cetera? So we look at the city of the future and get off of the technology train for a second. What does it look like in terms of opportunities? I saw a video from 80 years ago, and what they guessed right was what they call them horseless carriages, and then they said automobiles with no people in them.
Right.
Guess that right. They guessed a lot of things right, but they had what do you see for the job opportunities as we think about all the technology impact on where will people work in your industry?
Well, that's a very good question. And when I couple not just technology, but the somewhat obvious impact AI is going to have on productivity, I think a lot of traditional jobs that we find in robotics, a lot of traditional jobs that we have now won't be around. It will be automated either through robotics or AI or a combination of both. But I do look at this as a way to enhance the human experience and allow us to be more creative and more efficient. And I think a lot of the same arguments were made even back in the late 1800s when the electricity
Yeah.
came, and like, oh, this is going to be terrible for society, and it's going to be, something that's going to oppress jobs, and turns out it was an incredible enhancement to civilizations and to society. So I think hopefully that will play out the same way. Now, when you look 20 years out in the future, who knows how things will be?
Yeah.
But I'd like to think there's the more optimistic view of how this will play out in a very beneficial way for.
Well, I think so, but I sent Andreas and Llewellyn in Antarctica. They did an impact of AI on 15 million jobs in America. And they said which one would be safe and which ones would not be safe. But what they did not say is which ones would be created.
Right. And I think that's an excellent point, John.
And so what happens is that as we look at the replacement of ourselves, then jobs will be created to watch Llewellyn's digital twin, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not sure if that's not a robot I'm looking at with Llewellyn now. He's mighty nice today. He might be a twin.
I would it were, because I could be doing some work.
Yeah, but the point is, we're going to need people to see after these things.
There are a lot of good points on the table here. The first one I want to say is, where possible, let markets work. And somehow when we get into production of housing and electricity, we don't want to let the market work. We want to impose something on it. The way the market would work is the only political action we have to do in many instances is solve the siting issue. They're not in my backyard, which is a siting issue. If we could site apartment buildings and people didn't insist in living in detached houses with lawns, we probably would get the housing crisis solved, all 9 million units built surprisingly fast. I also salute Andres today for bringing up the fact that it's astounded me all of my life how there is no move to automate the production of housing or even to standardize it. This is because of personal taste and regional taste. We don't have a national taste in houses. We have national taste in hamburgers and also, but not in houses.
Right.
And that is a very slowing force. However, my feeling about housing, and I think that it has the market dimension, and that is, you don't go out and say we must build affordable housing. That terrifies communities. That suggests we want to put poor people among you, and that will bring with it all sorts of problems. Just build the houses, build expensive houses, and then the current stock will become available to those with less money. But to go and build, I saw this happen when they wished in social engineering affordable housing into rich areas. One was Reston, Virginia, a model community. I lived there, a very nice place to live. But then they built affordable housing, and they got people who were incompatible with the people who were living there. And so there was social stress. It wasn't a solution. A solution would have gone on as you were, and gradually some of the houses would become affordable, and there would be an orderly social step up instead of a forced one. So I think we need to rethink that, but we do need to solve the siting issue for houses, for power plants, for power lines. We cannot live in a society in which a small group of people, 4, hires a lawyer, and 1 in every 5 seems to be a lawyer, and that's the end of that project. I mentioned this lovely little piece of nonsense from Britain, in which they say, Dada, not NIMBY, but Dada, decide, announce, defend, abandon. And this goes on all the time. We know we need to store electricity, but the Consolidated Edison Company in New York City spent 19 years trying to build a pump storage unit along the Hudson River, careful that nobody would see it, that nothing would be disturbed, that it would be close to enhancing of the situation that prevailed before they built a dam. after 19 years, the company just gave up too much. A lot of lawyers had become very wealthy, and a lot of landowners thought they had won some great victory. Well, maybe when they're sweating in the dark this summer, they might see it as related to their own activities. So we need to solve the siting issue. We need not to worry too much. We need to let things settle down, let markets work, let society become used to new realities. And we've done it pretty well. I mean, we've become used to this entire internet reality, which is our reality, is where we live now, and it wasn't so 40 years ago. Tremendous change, and in basically 2 generations, everything has changed. But even people of my generation now live entirely in a world that they could not conceive. I remember when I was in Helsinki in Finland, when we were first shown, I think it was at Nokia before it became a cell phone company, their attempts to do what we're doing now. But they were trying to do pictures by wire, and it was very cumbersome, and you had to sit very still. Otherwise, you would only get half of your mouth moving. You couldn't do that because that would screw the whole picture up, and pixels would go dancing around. And now look at it. Look at what we are doing now. It doesn't actually matter. I do my television program with people who can be in China or Australia as recently last week, in South Africa, and it's effortless on Zoom. These are changes that are profound. As to the job thing, this is a very unpredictable and difficult thing, and there have been times historically when new moves have benefited society as a whole and been very damaging to pockets of society. For example, the spread of woolen goods. We were better clothed, and this was largely a function of the British woolen mills till they came to America. But a lot of people were driven out of their homes because the landlords wanted to put down every little inch to sheep. They were called the clearances, and it was one of the scandals of British history. And we may see that kind of thing again. My own feeling is you're safe if you actually repair things with your hands. It's going to be a long time before, when the drain is clogged up in your house, that a robot is coming.
Yeah.
You're pretty
So,
safe
John,
being a
let
plumber.
me say
You're
this.
not
Let
so
me say this,
safe.
Llewellyn. I
You're
think that
not so safe being a writing code, because a lot of computer code can be written remotely. We've got to just let some of these things roll over us and stop agonizing about them, just as I'm rolling over you so enjoyably, Johnny.
well, let me roll over you a little bit here. Llewellyn, what's happening in America, let's go to the data, despite what we want to happen, that is, everybody live together and etc. If you look at an indication of gated communities in America, that is an indication of saying no, quote, affordable housing. Everybody that's there should belong there financially.
And no apartments.
Absolutely. And if you look at what happened in the old world, where they built gated communities also to keep people out, back in the 1700s, don't you think that the movement toward gated communities, and there are many in Austin, where you have to drive through like getting on an airplane, indication of something? It's an indication of something to come. It's an indication of protection. It's an indication of the haves and the have-nots. It is an indication of a social kind of situation that is evolving in America. And by the way, even when we redo American cities, there are a portion of those cities that are gated. So you won't be free to go in New York City from one borough to another. You're not free to go through communities in Austin, Texas, and Dallas, Texas, because they are gated. And as social scientists and technologists, we have to look at that and say, what does that mean for the future? And
Mhm.
Don, I want to ask you, when your vision of America in terms of cities and the building of buildings, you talk about smart buildings. There's an economic component in the sense that some buildings will not be smart and not be as protective and will not cause their own fire and etc. So I think that's the reality that we have to deal with.
Well, absolutely, John, and I agree with that. And I think there's a role for the government to, create a more equitable opportunity environment. And that includes what housing resources are available and things like that, because, the United States isn't a caste society. We want to have an open environment where everybody collaborates and communicates, and it's a open dialogue about where we share ideas and vision. And hopefully the United States doesn't lose that. I think that's one of the great advantages of the United States, is having this environment that fosters collaboration across ethnic grounds and economic boundaries and things like that. So hopefully we can continue that tradition and even enhance it.
Yeah, Don, let's go back to your company and what you're all doing, and how is BuilderPay and BuilderChain accelerating or helping the efficiency of the construction world?
Well, sure. And let me share my screen real quick, and I'll
Sure.
pull up this slide here thing, and let's see. Okay. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. Excellent.
What
Well,
we
let's
do,
kind of
BuilderPay.
start with what we talked about originally. I mean, whether it's alternative energy sources or data centers or new forms of housing supply, all of them have a path through construction to get there. If we don't have a construction project, we don't have alternative forms of energy or data centers being delivered. So I think construction is something that's a critical component in delivering the future vision of what this country and the rest of the world can benefit from. So BuilderPay was conceived based on an experience of a home builder in Atlanta. And it was a home builder that was building around 300 houses a year. And they were able to transition to 1,500 houses a year in the Atlanta market. But they had enough contractors for 300, but they didn't have enough for 1,500. So Mike Johnson, which was one of the owners of the company, this is back in the late 90s, decided he would go talk to the other trade contractors working for other home builders and tell them, listen, I'm not going to ask you to stop working with the home builder you're working with now, but if you come work on our jobs first, we will pay you immediately after the task is completed. We will make that payment within 24 hours, and we will deposit the funds directly into your checking account. You won't even have to pick up a check. Well, you know what? His trade contractor shortage went completely away, and he actually kind of became a hero of the trade contractors. And he would be invariably asked, well, why don't the other home builders and general contractors pay us like this? And he says, unless they have the infrastructure to pay like this, and that includes the use of purchase orders for the task, so there's payments are predefined, and the use of daily payment approval and daily scheduling, they don't have the infrastructure to support that kind of payment method. So in this case, Mike created this real competitive advantage with the trade market, and was able to maintain that. So this is where the idea for BuilderPay originated from, is how can we take that model and commercialize it and deliver it to other general contractors and home builders. So one of the things I like to share about BuilderPay is it's designed specifically for handling fiduciary funds. It's not like PayPal or Venmo, where you're just handling payments with no kind of governance and control. As you know, construction loans and construction draws are fiduciary funds, and they're designated to pay for that construction project and for nothing else. So that's one of the core value of BuilderPay and what we're doing here. So again, you know, we're making arrangements to pay immediately after task completion. Now, we're very judicious about that process. We incorporate a two-party checklist process where the trade contractor has to go through a checklist and verify that all the various items related to that task completion is done. They submit that checklist completion to the project manager. He reviews those checklist items and also approves them to confirm that that task is truly complete before the payment button even lights up. So we make sure that through this two-party checklist process that that task is completed in its entirety. And that checklist item can include things like photographs that are geo-stamped and time-stamped. So there is a true governance around the documentation of that task completion. So what happens is once that payment's approved by the project manager, we have either the project owner or the construction lender has the funds in a project escrow account, and we do an ACH transfer directly from the project escrow account directly into the trade's checking account. So let's kind of look at what the problem is here. You know, even myself, I knew it was a major problem. Every time I talk to a trade contractor, I say, "What's your number one problem?" And he says, "Getting paid taking too long to get paid." You know, and turns out it's had a pretty significant negative impact on the construction industry. Here's a construction trade publication that said that slow payments is a direct cause of $136 billion in costs. Now, that's a big number, but the construction industry is a big number. It's $1.2 trillion in the United States and over 11 trillion internationally. And they project that'll be 25 trillion by the year 2030.
Wow.
So, you know, what we did is we looked at how construction draws worked traditionally with a construction lender. And really, that draw process hasn't changed in the last 50 years. There's a draw request, same thing I did as a production home builder, and I was building over 500 houses a year. We had to do a draw request. They would send out an inspector to look at the project and turn in a percent complete form, and then that would be brought back to the construction lender's office, and they had a staff of people that would figure out how much has been drawn to date and how much is available to draw with this request, and create a check, and that check would be either sent or delivered to the general contractor. And then we would have to run it through our own accounts payable process to distribute it out to the trade contractors. So what we look to do is, how can we improve the cash flow of these trade contractors? And I always ask every trade contractor when I talk to them, I said, would you rather get paid in 2 months or 2 hours? You know, and surprisingly, all of them came back and said 2 hours. So, so it's a pretty universal issue, and something I think no one has to have a lot of technological background to wrap their heads around about the value proposition. So that's what we're looking to address. So what we did is we took the legacy construction draw process and said, how can we re-envision this draw process and start with a clean slate? And how can we leverage blockchain technology? And in particular, we leverage tokenization of the construction funds. And the reason we don't do it as a cryptocurrency exercise, but as a what's called an NFT, to create an immutable record of those funds in escrow. And what's unique about creating those funds in the escrow account is we can assign the project ID, the task ID, and the vendor ID to a token. We couldn't do that with other types of currency, fiat type currency. And what that allows us to do, since we're using this tokenization, is now those tokens can be only used for that project and that project alone. The general contractor can't use it to pay his truck payment. He can't use it to even pay for another project to the same vendor. So now, as the source of funds, I know my funds are being used exactly in the prescribed manner and in that manner alone. So that's, I think, an incredible value addition to what has happened in the past and one of the big problems. So we have developed a infrastructure to facilitate that is ingrained directly into the traditional construction project management exercise. So and we do this with replacing the legacy draw methodology. We create these digital twins of the source of funds. And this is where we assign these parameters or properties to the token, where we have a project ID, a vendor ID, and a task ID. And then when these tokens are executed, and we use smart contracts to automate those that tokenization process, it allows us to accelerate these trade contractor payments in a significant way without compromising governance and control. Because everybody would like to get paid quicker, but nobody wants to give up that governance control, and that's why it's been historically a more lengthy and drawn out type process. So I think one unique thing about what we're talking about here is we're bringing benefit to all three parties involved in this construction process, whether it's the lender, project owner. They have a much higher level of visibility and control over how their funds get used. The trade contractors are getting paid much faster and getting their funds deposited without having to have office staff and overhead associated with that process. And the builder is creating significant competitive advantage for these scarce trade contractor resources. And I tell people, BuilderPay doesn't solve the trade contractor shortage, but it does solve it for the general contractor that is using it because they're getting favorable status, and the best trades always migrate to the best source. So it's I think a win-win-win for all three parties here.
John, this is very interesting. Can I ask you how much?
Sure, absolutely.
How much of the country do you cover?
What's that?
How much of the country do you cover? Is it?
Well, we're covering the whole United States, and we look to expand that because we're building on an incredible platform called Palantir. It's called the Foundry platform, and is truly an international product. But we're starting out domestically in the United States, but we have been told many times that the value of BuilderPay may be even greater in third world countries where graft and corruption and control of funds is even more of an issue. And so we can see where having this level of not only accelerating payments, but enhancing this governance control profile being an even more valuable resource internationally. And we certainly intend to deliver that sooner versus later.
Can I just ask quickly, what is the traditional, we've always thought of this, if you're a layman like myself, far from building trades, what is the role of the banks? We always thought the banks handled staged payments.
Well, that is exactly, and I would say one of the prime customers for something like BuilderPay would be the lenders, and the idea is they can offset their traditional construction draw staff and overhead and replace it with BuilderPay as a turnkey service. And, the banks are already doing this with check writing facilities. They use like Zella you know, to handle. So outsourcing this is not a lot different, but BuilderPay is uniquely designed to handle those fiduciary funds where accountability and application is so important compared to just generic check services or payment type services.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, Don, you know, this is a great application of technology to what I would call the supply chain of tasks.
Right.
Of course, if you look at what Walmart did in knocking out the quote middleman or what you call the power brokers, what it does, it allows the workers themselves to get paid to receive their rewards as quick as possible. And if you think about, you know, if you're doing a comparative analysis, say in a classroom, right? So you could have your pay system here, you know, contrasted with the fact that, hey, you work now and now your money goes directly to your account. I mean, how many people did that knock out, right? So
Well, absolutely. And, you know, at the end of the day, there was value with the legacy methodology.
that's right.
And a lot of it was around needing to provide that governance and control, but now we can provide that governance control, maybe even in a superior manner,
Right.
utilizing new technology. And blockchain technology, especially enterprise blockchain technology, hasn't been around that long. And the effective application of that technology has not always been promoted as much as some of the other technologies have been. So, but we also look at, you know, coupling this with AI technology and creating an operational platform that can operate at a more efficient and a more effective manner than what has been done historically around construction projects. And that's a lot of the role that BuilderChain plays. It is a construction network.
Right. Done in
BuilderPay is a service on top of that BuilderChain platform.
Yeah, in my history of working with companies, email was the greatest disruptor of all.
Absolutely, no question about it.
Contact information had to leave the CEO, go to the managers, from the managers to the assistant managers, and all of a sudden the workers would get it. Now all of a sudden the CEO could send emails to every worker everywhere and didn't need management, which brought the CEO back into the whole idea of the management of the company. And it was rejected by managers because they saw email as a threat to their authority. Because they was, how did you know that? What manager told you? And I think that the application is wonderful. It's another great application of technology to how we manage the chain of tasks in the construction business.
Well, I hope so, John. I hope you're right about that. And I think what's really important is it isn't a zero-sum game where somebody pays and somebody gains. It's something that where there's mutual benefit to all the stakeholders and parties involved. So I think that's and that's the way technology should work. It should not be a burden in this day and time. It should be something that enhances our experience, whether it's construction or some other type of.
So Don, where are you on promoting this? It strikes me that the federal government and state governments are largely funding construction at an accelerated pace of all kinds of things, and the government is very fuzzy or you know high bar on the requirements of the funds and the distribution of the funds. And when you get a contract signed, it has all these details, and if you want to make a change order, you have to get approval again, and for that reason that the funds can now be moved around and so on. So is the government looking at this and endorsing it or using it anywhere, or where are you on your journey of adoption?
Well, we're starting with medium-sized general contractors and medium-sized construction lenders. But I've been told many times, like you mentioned, about same way with international opportunity, that government projects are some of the slowest paced scenarios out there. And they have the hardest time recruiting, especially smaller trade contractors, because they can't afford the cash flow burden imposed by slow pay. Now, the government's just like any other project owner. They want to make sure that the tasks are complete, The tasks are well documented that they're complete, so they're paying for only work that is truly appropriate to be paid. But that's the exact intent and purpose of how BuilderPay was designed. So we certainly see government projects not only using a technology like this, but really enhancing these government projects to be able to tap into a larger spectrum of contractor size that may be able to participate where they might not otherwise be able to.
And so are you open today where anybody can contact you and
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we are still pre-revenue. We're starting May 1st as our date of, and we're leveraging a format called one-day discovery boot camp. So we can have potential customers come in and look at the technology and try it out, see if it'll work for them. It's the same strategy that Palantir has been used over the last year and proven very successful. And so, you know, our goal is to make sure we deliver real value to our customers. And we're not just selling technology, we're looking to create an end result that is profitable and can shorten some of these construction cycle times. One of the things that Mike experienced when he started paying his trades down in Atlanta is the stubs started showing up the very next day when the task is ready. And the trade would say, listen, if my other builders pay me once every 2 weeks, it doesn't matter if I show up on Tuesday or Thursday or Wednesday the following week, I'm gonna get paid on the same pay cycle. If I show up on your job on Tuesday, I get my funds in the checking account by Wednesday. So there was a great incentive. So he saw his construction cycle time shorten about 25% as a direct byproduct of being able to pay quicker. And of course, the subs absolutely loved it and benefited from it. Now, another benefit Mike mentioned, he kind of anticipated his construction cycle time shortening, but he also saw a qualitative improvement. And the reason why is he'd asked the trades, he said, well, why are you sending your best crews? And he says, we want to make sure we don't screw up and not get paid tomorrow. So he sent their best crews to make sure that task was 100% complete and spot on. So it didn't interrupt that payment cycle for the next day. So it was a win both from a quantitative standpoint and a qualitative standpoint.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, any final thoughts? We're running out of time here with Don.
Yes, I think there are two industries that's lagged. That is medical doctors in terms of what they do in the construction industry. When I say lagged in terms of the application of technology for the management of what they do. I would put in their law firms because they still write on yellow paper, you know. Yep. But if you look at what doctors, I'm working with a company now out of Baton Rouge, and they're looking at all the things that the doctors write down, but they never get a chance to do them. So there are literally thousands of procedures that should be done. So what they're doing, Don, they're doing what you're doing, right? They're trying to say, okay, we're gonna apply technology to this, and then we're going to make sure that the people who provide the things that go into the human body, the gadgets go into the human body, are paid right away. Because remember, we'll say this, the problem with medicine now is, write this down, it takes too long for them to get paid. Problem with medicine now is,
you're so right, John. I mean, it's a universal problem that can be addressed across all different types of industry.
Yeah, and so
I'm pretty sure if I'd asked somebody in the medical industry would you really get paid in 2 months or 2 hours, they'd have the same response, right?
Andreas and I are working with companies where it's 6 months before they get paid.
Well, that's even more.
Let me interrupt you.
With doctors, it's 6 months. Can you imagine being a medical doctor?
Not only are journalists very poorly paid, but we're paid very late, if at all.
Right.
Our situation is
well, I think that what I'm seeing is, what I see here is Andreas, we've been talking to our medical clients, and I'm telling you, Don, it might be 6 months before they get paid.
Well, hopefully we can address that, because
it might be 3 months before they get paid.
Well, that's a $6 trillion opportunity, Don.
Yeah, you know, certainly in the case of construction funds, those funds are allocated when the construction loan's made. So it's only an inefficient process, and trying to maintain legacy governance control that has delayed the process. So hopefully we can address that in an effective way.
That's what medicine is faced with now.
That's right.
I
Yep.
mean, that, you know, we could talk to you about that, applying it to because Andrea and I have been working with people trying to get past that. But can you imagine, forget about a week paper, can you imagine a 6 months process of getting paid? Can you imagine that?
Well, I'm sure it imposes a lot of stress on
Yeah,
people.
like, yes.
It's
Oh, yeah.
unfair and unfortunate because it's more than just a cash flow issue.
Right.
It affects the human condition, and hopefully we can address that as well. So,
Mhm.
and I'll just tell you another scenario. I was talking to some software developers, and one of them said, this would be great to orchestrate software development. I could have my developers work on a task-based method, and as soon as they completed that task, they would get paid on this very granular
Sure.
next 24-hour basis. And
Mhm.
so I think at the end of the day, this could be applied in a lot more ways than this construction itself.
Yeah, Don, final question. Do you see any
Sure.
competition? Do you see the PayPals and the Venmos and the Stripes and anybody else, the Square, anybody else? Or maybe they're partners of yours over time. I don't know. I mean, how do you, I think that, what are the difficulties of building a pervasive network here?
Well, we're pretty excited that we're building on this incredibly powerful platform called Palantir Foundry. And it is a true international enterprise-based application and doing incredible work. But at the end of the day, we really aren't the same as a PayPal or a Venmo. We're managing fiduciary funds, and we're not even handling the funds. We're just basically providing a traffic cop signaling system to have the funds transfer directly from the project owner or general contractor's escrow account, project escrow account, directly into the trade contractor's checking account. And matter of fact, when you think about it, the accounts payable staff and the accounts payable overhead burden goes away for the general contractor. They basically approve payment and the funds flow over. They don't even have to handle the distribution of funds. I mean, when I was a home builder, I had 5 or 6 people in accounts payable. All that staff goes completely away. And on top of that, deliver a superior experience for my trade contractors.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we're pretty excited about it. And I don't see a lot of direct competition for it because blockchain technology is what makes this feasible by
Sure.
using tokenizing the funds for governance control and having that immutable ledger. And it's something that allows us to accelerate that payment process without compromising integrity of the process.
Sure. Llewellyn, final thoughts.
Well, I think it's very interesting. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I've heard about problems in getting paid. If we had more time, I'd also talk about the role of architects in the construction mess and why architects aren't leading the battle with some sort of standardization and materials, etc. But it's been a fascinating hour, and I thank him very much. I can't actually see the people. Not only am I challenged with cash flow, I'm also challenged by computers. And I've done something to mine, so I'm speaking to you, but not seeing you.
Johnny, final thoughts.
John, what I want you to do is think about money as a commodity. Think about how we move things in this society. And then when you think about money as things that's needed, then you can compare money to bread, compare money to automobiles, money to electricity. And so it just becomes another great application of how do we get this commodity, if you will, into the hands of the people who need it. And when you do that, I want you to think of your business as a supply chain for the movement of money and not necessarily for payment. Because when you think about it as a supply chain, then everything enters into it, not only money, but also the things that help people to get money, which in this case is the trades. So I want you to write that down, and that's a
I am
big,
right.
That's $1 billion
Very
idea.
important information, John.
That's $1 billion idea.
It
And
really is.
I
And
just,
at the end of the day, this is kind of a start of a universal application for these new technologies.
absolutely.
And I think if they're applied effectively, they can be great benefit to
That's
us.
right. And when you think about, I was on Andrea's shop and this thing cost me $1 billion. Just write a check to the great university where you finish.
That's right. That's right.
If you don't want to do that, you can just send it to me, of course. Or you can send it to Northwestern or LSU, and I'll be happy. So I think how you think about the process, this great process that you're doing, is just another great application to the movement of something that happens to be money, and it solves a great problem, and we speed up and get the best and brightest coming to construction sites.
Right. Well, I'll leave one thing. There was one fellow when a trade contractor asked him whether you get paid 2 hours. He says, "No, how about 1 hour?"
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, nobody makes the argument about getting paid longer. Yeah.
Well, we used to
Sure.
say, I'm sending it today, I want to send it today, and I better have it in 6 months. I better have it in 2 months. I better have it in 3 months. Now, Andrea say that you get it in 3 seconds. So technology has sped up everything.
Right.
So we don't have to wait anymore in this instant gratification of wants that we live in. And right now, getting paid will have a great influx on everything. How you pay your rent, how money moves through the economy. It will have a great impact.
Well, you're
Yeah.
right. And I mean, a lot of these trades have,
Yep.
direct labor. They get paid every week. So it
That's right.
really is a hardship for these trades to wait for payment. So hopefully we
Sure.
can.
So it's good. I like it.
Don, in parting, thank you for being with us. What is in front of you the next 90 days? What's going on with your company in the next 90 days?
Well, we're excited about this boot camp we have scheduled for May 1st. And, it's a situation where we bring potential customers in and they explore how we can apply technology. And maybe it's BuilderPay, or maybe it's a procurement exercise, or maybe it's scheduling optimization. We have a lot of resources that are part of the Palantir Foundry platform that can provide very effective solutions for the construction industry, of which BuilderPay is just one.
All right. Well, thank you for being with us today, Don, and we'll keep track of you and have you back in the future, and all the best and congratulations for everything you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody joining today, and thank you for the opportunity, Andre. So,
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Very
Yes,
thank you,
interesting.
guys.
always good.
Johnny, take us away.
Some
Bye.
say I'm a no count, and others say I'm no good. But I'm just a natural born traveling man, doing what I think I should. Oh yeah, doing what I think I should. And I don't give a damn about a greenback dollar. Spend it fast as I can. Oh, well, song and a good guitar are the only things that I understand. Oh boy, the only things that I understand.
Woo.
Thank you, John. I'm from Memphis, so we have a
Feedback.
rich musical heritage here, so I particularly appreciate that.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, my friends. Y'all have a
Thank
good
you,
day.
guys. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.